Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to discuss, is it a good idea to fix an old car? So I came across a video similar to this from a Toyota mechanic on YouTube, and basically he was saying it depends on the situation. But if the car needs over a certain amount worth of work, as a mechanic, he doesn't feel right telling people to go one way or another. He thinks it's unprofessional. And he says he can lean one way or another, but he says he doesn't feel right outright saying it. But today we'll go ahead and discuss everything, and I'll go ahead and let you know how I feel about it. So first, if you're in any kind of professional environment, I can kind of see his point about not going one way or another, at least not flat out, because you really don't know the history of someone's car. I mean, that car could have belonged to someone's late grandmother for all you know. That car could have belonged to someone's late mother or father for all you know. I mean, you really don't know the story of someone else's car. I mean, it may hold some sentimental value, and you don't want to look at someone who's trying to get some answers for their late father's car and say, oh, you should sell it and get another one just like it. I mean, yeah, that's kind of doesn't seem 100% right to do that. But I do think most of us would agree, if you have a 20, 25, 30-year-old car that needs some major engine work, or the transmission starting to go, then perhaps it's probably time to move on. But sometimes it isn't always that obvious, because sometimes it's a bunch of little stuff that can go. For instance, if you have a 20-year-old Toyota Camry and it needs brake work, suspension work, perhaps it burns a little bit of oil, maybe a couple of the windows don't work anymore or are on their way out, and you don't know how to fix any of that stuff, then perhaps it might be time to move on, because a mechanic is going to charge you parts plus labor, and that's where it starts to add up really quick. Also, how you maintain the car during the time you had it has a lot to do with it too. If you're a younger driver, you got grandma's old Avalon, but you really wanted a Mustang, so you've been kind of lax on maintenance and upkeep, then that's going to play a part in it too. For example, one of the biggest causes of oil burning is not changing your oil often enough. So if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty and dig into it, there are a few factors that play into whether or not you should fix an old car or move on to another one. For instance, my '03 Highlander, it's got almost 200,000 miles. It burns a little bit of oil between oil changes, but it's not horrible. And in 8 years of ownership, I really only had to turn it around and drive it back home once. And that was when the ignition coil went bad. Actually, I take that back. We'll technically say twice, because when it threw up the P0302 code, I thought it was spark plugs. I swapped the spark plugs out, and it worked fine for maybe about 2 to 3 weeks. And then I had to drive it back home again, and that's when I found out it was the ignition coil. Link to those videos will be in the description. And I mean, honestly, it's an older car, so yeah, I have had to fix things here and there on it, but I've always kept up on things as they happen, and that plays a big part in it too. In the time I've had it, I've had to replace the valve cover gasket. It had the rear tail light failure that first generation Highlanders are notorious for. I had to replace the rear struts, a window regulator, really got me thinking back on this, the ignition coil. So the key is to take care of things as they happen, that little stuff. Because if I'd have put it off and just let the problems accumulate, then guess what? I'd have a pretty hefty bill on my hands right now because of all the problems. There's actually an old saying, trying to save pennies today is only going to cost you dollars tomorrow. So, when things do happen with your older car, and they're relatively small, jump on them now. Take care of them. Because you also got to remember, newer cars are nice, but car payments. The bank is going to expect their money every month. But if your older car maybe needs something once or twice a year, then It's cheaper to just take care of those once or twice a year things than to make car payments. But then say you have an older car, it's got a list of things wrong with it, and you just decide you want to sell it, you're done. Well, then at that point, the right thing to do would be to list it for sale and then let the buyer know everything they're getting into. There are some people that like to fix old cars, and if you were at least upfront with them, then they at least made an informed decision and everybody's happy, or at least they should be. But if you're selling an old car that's got a list of things wrong with it, and you're telling your buyer, oh yeah, this car is wonderful, I just got a newer car, that's the only reason I'm getting rid of this one, then guess what? Not a very honest or moral thing to do. But back to whether or not you should fix an old car. Honestly, it just comes down to a numbers game and knowing the car. If the car is otherwise in good shape and it's a relatively cheap fix, then go ahead and do it. If the car is not in that great a shape, or you abused and neglected it, or the repair that it needs is something major, an engine, a transmission, something big, then perhaps it's time to just go ahead and move on. But that's just my take on it. Drop a comment, let me know what you guys think. Also, I invite you to come check out Jesus Bible Study. I take passages from the Bible and make them relevant to today's world. Link to this week's video will be in the description. And don't forget, new videos every Sunday. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I will see you guys next week.